Hello, folks, and welcome back. As promised, we have another spooky story today, or at least the first half of one. This is another one that I've decided to do it in two parts, just because it is a little bit long. We are going to be enjoying a work of Arthur Conan Doyle, actually. A lot of people, of course, know him for Sherlock Holmes. I won't insult you by trying to explain who Arthur Conan Doyle is. But he did actually do, a lot of the Sherlock Holmes stuff are short stories, but he did wade into the more horror side of things fairly regularly. So, what we have today is one of his more macabre horror tales. We are going to be reading The Case of Lady Sannox, I believe is how that's pronounced, Sannox. There's no one here to tell me that that's not how it's pronounced, so that's how I'm going to say it. Now, I'm going to warn everybody, as per the usual, before I start, that these are antique stories. This one was written, I believe, at the very end of the 19th century, and as such, we are possibly going to be hearing things about race, gender, religion, orientation, sexuality that are incompatible with most modern sensibilities. And I will point out that in this story in particular, we do delve a little bit. If I reach way back to my undergraduate degree, I believe the term is Orientalism. So there is some of that in here, and some misogyny, and just there's some not great stuff in here. And in addition to that, and dealing with the macabre things that make horror stories, so that usual warning applies as well, that these tend to be stories that involve murders and suicides and, things that create horror. So again, if these things are not for you, please feel free to not consume this content. I also want to point out that in this story in particular, folks, there's going to be no winners today. Everybody involved in this is really just not a very nice person. Although that does relieve you of the burden of rooting for somebody. I would argue that, everybody involved in this story is kind of an asshole. I don't agree with how the situation is handled, but everyone's kind of a dick. So this is one of those things where it's a good story. I enjoy it. That's why I've chosen it to share with you. It does evoke, at least in me, some very strong feelings by the end of it, and I think those feelings are important to explore and think about, and why a lot of the things in this story are distasteful to modern sensibilities. It is also a pretty good short story, and very much on the macabre side of things. This is not a ghost story, though. This is a creepy story. This is a horror story, but it is in fact not a ghost story here today. So with all of that aside, I'm going to have some liquid, some coffee in this case, before I start. Very good. And I think that's it for all the warnings I have for you for this story. As usual, if you enjoy these videos, please like them, please subscribe to the channel, please share the videos around. And not that Doyle needs help being recognized as a great author, but a lot of these sorts of stories outside of his Sherlock Holmes are not as well known, so please feel free to share with someone that you think would really enjoy this. So after all of that, and I do apologize for the long preamble today, The Case of Lady Sannox. The relations between Douglas Stone and the notorious Lady Sannox were very well known both among the fashionable circles of which she was a brilliant member, and the scientific bodies which numbered him among their most illustrious conferees. I do also apologize for any misspeaking that I might do. I'm sure it's going to happen, even more so than what I just did. And we've already got our first indication of trouble with the notorious Lady Sannox. Although I feel if I were a 19th century lady, the only way to live would be to be notorious. What else could you do? There was naturally, therefore, a very widespread interest when it was announced one morning that the lady had absolutely and forever taken the veil, and that the world would see her no more. So by taking the veil, they mean she's gone into religious order, so become a nun, taken religious vows. That's what that means. When at the very tail of this rumor there came the assurance that the celebrated operating surgeon, the man of steel nerves, had been found in the morning by his valet, seated on one side of his bed, smiling pleasantly upon the universe, with both legs jammed into one side of his breeches, and his great brain about as valuable as a cupful of porridge. The matter was strong enough to give quite a little thrill of interest to folk who had never hoped that their jaded nerves were capable of such a sensation. So there were shenanigans afoot here. Douglas Stone, in his prime, was one of the most remarkable men in England. Indeed, he could hardly be said to have ever reached his prime, for he was but 39 at the time of this little incident. Feel like by the end of it, I'm not going to care, and I'm going to think he kind of deserved it. Those who knew him best were aware that, famous as he was as a surgeon, he might have succeeded with even greater rapidity in any of a dozen lines of life. He could have cut his way to fame as a soldier, struggled to it as an explorer, bullied for it in the courts, or built it out of stone and iron as an engineer. He was born to be great, for he could plan what another man dare not do, and he could do what another man dare not plan. In surgery, none could follow him. His nerve, his judgment, his intuition were things apart. Again and again his knife cut away death, but grazed the very springs of life in doing it, until his assistants were as white as the patient. His energy, his audacity, his full-blooded self-confidence, does not the memory of them still linger to the south of Marylebone Road and the north of Oxford Street? So apparently this guy is just God's gift to the world, which means naturally I already hate him. I'm so great, blah, 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 blah. I could do anything. That's what I think of this guy. But maybe I'm just jaded. Though probably not. He seems like he'd be really annoying at parties. His vices were as magnificent as his virtues, and infinitely more picturesque. Large as was his income, and it was the third largest of all professional men in London, it was far beneath the luxury of his living. Yeah, he seems like he'd be kind of an asshole. Deep in his complex nature lay a rich vein of sensualism, at the sport of which he placed all the prizes of his life. The eye, the ear, the touch, the palate, all were his masters. The bouquet of old vintages, the scent of rare exotics, the curves and tints of the daintiest potteries of Europe, it was to these that the quick-running stream of gold was transformed. And then there came his sudden mad passion for Lady Sannox, when a single interview with 2 challenging glances and a whispered word set him ablaze. She was the loveliest woman in London, and the only one to him. He was one of the handsomest men in London, but not the only one to her. She had a liking for new experiences, and was gracious to most men who wooed her. It might have been cause, or it might have been effect, that Lady Sannox looked 50. Oh, I'm sorry, I totally read that wrong. It may have been cause, or it may have been effect, that the Lord Sannox looked 50, though he was but 36. Yeah, sure, let's blame the wife. That's fine. Maybe we should marry people we have a connection with, instead of whatever happened here, which I know relatively common back then for especially wealthy people to marry for reasons other than actually liking one. But screw it, I don't think I like Douglas Stone. He seems like an asshole who is just like a party boy, who thinks he's God's gift to man. I also don't like Tony Stark for similar reasons. And so you know what? I'm just gonna I'm just gonna rag on the dudes for a little bit. Seems like Lady Sannox would be pretty cool. So we have our description of her husband, Lord Sannox. He was a quiet, silent, neutral tinted man, this lord, with thin lips and heavy eyelids, much given to gardening, and full of home-like habits. So he doesn't like to go out. He had at one time been fond of acting, had even rented a theatre in London, and on its boards had first seen Miss Marian Dawson, to whom he had offered his hand, his title, and the third of a county. Since his marriage, this early hobby had become distasteful to him. Even in private theatricals, it was no longer possible to persuade him to exercise the talent which he had often shown that he possessed. He was happier with a spud and a watering can among his orchids and chrysanthemums. So, I don't know why we're ragging on the lady and giving her husband so much leeway. He proposed to her with we're not given any indication that it was anything other than her appearance. So I don't know, man. I mean, I think I've said this before in these stories. If you're not gonna actually take the time to get to know a person before marrying them, maybe you deserve what happens. It was quite an interesting problem whether he was absolutely devoid of sense or miserably wanting in spirit. Did he know his lady's ways and condone them, or was he a mere blind dog, doting or mere blah? I'm sorry for all the misspeaking I'm doing today, and this is actually quite easy reading. Did he know his lady's ways and condone them, or was he a mere blind, doting fool? It was a point to be discussed over the teacups in snug little drawing rooms, or with the aid of a cigar in the bow windows of clubs. Bitter and plain were the comments upon Bitter and plain were the comments among men upon his conduct. There was but one who had a good word to say for him, and he was the most silent member in the smoking room. He had seen him break in a horse at university, and it seemed to have left an impression upon his mind. So yeah, I'm gonna blame him if he has a problem with this his wife's behavior. He clearly didn't take the time to get to know her before proposing, or he knew and didn't care and figured, I don't know, the magical healing powers of his dick would cure her of her wayward ways. I mean, like, it's a thing, right? Like, if you have somebody that's really introverted and somebody's really extroverted, yeah, there are probably gonna be times when you don't get along, especially in social circles. Especially since, like, he seems to have gone from not totally living wanting to only be at home. I mean, he was an actor for a little bit, so I think the lady would have been perfectly justified in thinking, oh yeah, like here's somebody who maybe isn't as flirty, because she's clearly being set up to be some sort of femme fatale here. He's clearly not on my level, but I could see her going into this marriage and then looking around with horror when he expects her to be shackled to his watering can as much as he is. But when Douglas Stone became the favorite, all doubts as to Lord Sannox's knowledge or ignorance were set forever at rest. There was no subterfuge about Stone. In his high-handed, impetuous fashion, he set all caution and discretion at defiance. The scandal became notorious. A learned body intimated that his name had been struck from the list of its vice presidents. Ooh, so he's getting in trouble at work for his conduct with a married woman. Two friends implored him to consider his professional credit. He cursed them all three and spent 40 guineas on a bangle to take with him to the lady. He was at her house every evening, and she drove in his carriage in the afternoons. There was not an attempt on either side to conceal their relations, but there came at last a little incident to interrupt them. Again, know somebody before you marry them. Let's just agree on that. If you take somebody that's of whatever gender that's super flirty and a little bit thirsty, let's be honest, don't expect them to change overnight because of the magical healing powers you perceive your genitals to have. Just don't do that. It was a dismal winter's night, very cold and gusty, with the wind whooping in the chimneys and blustering against the window panes. A thin spatter of rain tinkled on the glass with each fresh sough of the gale, drowning for the instant the dull gurgle and drip from the eaves. Douglas Stone had finished his dinner and sat by his fire in the study, a glass of rich port upon the malachite table at his elbow. As he raised it to his lips, he held it up against the lamplight and watched with the eye of a connoisseur the tiny scales of beeswing which floated in its rich ruby depths. I don't know enough about. What was this? Port? I don't know enough about port to know what that is. I'm assuming it's a mark of quality in 19th century port, which I believe is what, fortified wine? I don't remember. I should know that. I really should know that. I work with it in a profession. I use it at work in the historic kitchen fairly regularly. Port, sherry, that kind of thing. I feel like I should probably know what it is. Mind you, I haven't done like my actual job in like a year now, so my brain is going to be like a cup of runny porridge when and if we can ever all go back to something resembling normal. The fire, as it spurted up, threw fitful lights upon his bold, clear-cut face, with its widely opened gray eyes, its thick yet firm lips, and deep square jaw, which had something Roman in its strength and its animism. He smiled from time to time as he nestled back in his luxurious chair. Indeed, he had a right to feel well pleased, for, against the advice of 6 colleagues, he had performed an operation that day of which only 2 cases were on record, and the result had been brilliant beyond all expectation. No other man in London would have had the daring to plan or the skill to execute such a heroic measure. What a dick. Not that he saved a person's life. I agree with that. That's cool. I just have a real problem with this man's attitude. But he had promised Lady Sannox to see her that evening, and it was already 8:30. His hand was outstretched to the bell to order the carriage when he heard the dull thud of the knocker. An instant later, there was the shuffling of feet in the hall and the sharp closing of a door. "A patient to see you, sir, in the consulting room," said the butler. "About himself?" "No, sir. I think he wants you to go out." "It is too late," cried Douglas Stone peevishly. "I won't go." "This is his card, sir." The butler presented it upon the gold salver which had been given to his master by the wife of a prime minister. Ooh, big wig, rubs elbows with the prime minister. Yeah. Hamil Ali Smyrna. This fellow is a Turk, I suppose. "Yes, sir. He seems as if he came from abroad, sir, and he's in a terrible way." "I have an engagement. I must go somewhere else. But I'll see him. Show him in here, Pym." So I don't know about the accuracy of the name Hamil Ali. So Smyrna it is a place. So Hamil Ali is the name. I don't know that that is necessarily Turkish, but to Doyle, I'm sure it sounded sufficiently Middle Eastern. Like I said, I think there's going to be some distasteful race things in here. A few moments later, the butler swung open the door and ushered in a small and decrepit man, who walked with a bent back and with the forward push of the face, and the blink of the eyes which goes with extreme short sight. His face was swarthy, there it is, and his hair and beard of the deepest black. In one hand he held a turban of white muslin, striped with red, and the other a small chamois leather bag. I might have said that too Frenchly, chamois. I don't know. "Good evening," said Douglas Stone, when the butler had closed the door. "You speak English, I presume?" "Yes, sir. I am from Asia Minor, but I speak English when I speak slow." I don't know anybody that I know from the Middle East who introduces themselves as from Asia Minor. Which, I mean, I get that we're dealing with an antique Victorian document, but what a weird way to introduce someone. You want me to go out, I understand. Yes, sir, I want very much that you should see my wife. I could come in the morning, but I have an engagement which prevents me from seeing your wife tonight. The Turk's answer was a singular one. He pulled the string which closed the mouth of the chamois leather bag. I'm committed to the French pronunciation now, and poured a flood of gold onto the table. There are 100 pounds there, said he, and I promise you that it will not take you an hour. I have a cab ready at the door. Douglas Stone glanced at his watch. An hour would not make it too late to visit Lady Sannox. He had been there later, and the fee was an extraordinarily high one. He had been pressed by his creditors lately, and he could not afford to let such a chance pass. He would go. What is the case? He asked. Oh, it is so sad a one, so sad a one. You have not, perhaps, heard of the daggers of the, oh my goodness, the daggers of the Almohades? I'm going to go with Almohades. Never. Ah, they are Eastern daggers of a great age and of a singular shape, with the hilt like what you would call a stirrup. I am a curiosity dealer, you understand, and that is why I have come to England from Smyrna. But next week I go back once more. Many things I brought with me, and I have a few things left, but among them, to my sorrow, is one of these daggers. Yeah, give the daggers again, that's a sufficiently sounding exotic name to Doyle, I'm sure. Although that might be a real name, place, thing. I don't know. Maybe I'm being unnecessarily judgy, but I suspect not. You will remember that I have an appointment, sir, said the surgeon with some irritation. Pray confine yourself to the necessary details. I knew I didn't like this man. What a cock. You will see that it is necessary. Today my wife fell down in a faint in the room in which I keep my wares, and she cut her lower lip upon this cursed dagger of Almohades. I see, said Douglas Stone, rising, and you wish me to dress the wound. No, no, it is worse than that. What then? These daggers are poisoned. Poisoned! Yes, and there is no man, east or west, who can tell now what is the poison or what the cure. But all that is known I know, for my father was in this trade before me, and we have had much to do with these poisoned weapons. What are the symptoms? Deep sleep and death in 30 minutes. And you say there is no cure. Then why should you pay me this considerable fee? No drug can cure, but the knife may. And how? The poison is slow of absorption. It remains for hours in the wound. Washing, then, might cleanse it. No more than in a snake bite. It is too subtle and too deadly. Excision of the wound, then. That is it. If it be on the finger, take the finger off. So said my father always. But think of where the wound is, and that it is my wife. It is dreadful. But familiarity with such grim matters may take the finer edge from a man's sympathy, or the fact that this man's just honestly kind of a bastard. I doubt he would have had much sympathy anyway. To Douglas Stone, this was already an interesting case, and he brushed aside as irrelevant the feeble objections of the husband. It appears to be that or nothing, he said brusquely. It is better to lose a lip than a life. And that is where I'm going to stop with this story for now. I hope you have enjoyed it so far. As I said, we are getting a little bit of the not a little bit. We are getting some distasteful Victorian attitudes towards especially English Victorian attitudes towards people of different races in this story. I also don't like, I don't know if Doyle ever wrote from a female perspective, but I would be interested in hearing the ladies' opinions on all that is going on here. Because again, I maintain that nobody in this situation is blameless. Is she a jerk for being flirtatious and carrying on from what it sounds like probably multiple affairs? Yes. Is Douglas Stone, I think it's also strange that he's always referred to by his full name, knowingly carried on an affair with a married woman? Yes. Is it wrong of the husband to have married someone without, obviously, without knowing their, either without knowing their actual personality or just assuming that he would be able to stamp that out of her once they were married? Also, that's a strong yes. Again, no clear winners in at least in this first half of the story. I encourage you to speculate below in the comments section as to the direction this is going to go in. I'm going to leave it here for today. Thank you for choosing to spend some time with me here on my channel. If you've enjoyed the video, please like, please subscribe, please share it around. I hope you and your loved ones are safe and well, and I hope we are all moving to better times ahead. Bye, folks.